everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of the Professional Practice Series. I'm your host, Shunda Jenkins. Thank you for joining us for another grounded conversation on the real world side of practitioner work. Today, we're exploring something that every practitioner moves through, no matter their modality or experience level: how to care for your own inner world while staying in service to others. This episode looks at what it means to be in your own process while guiding clients, how to understand your limits with honesty, and how your personal healing supports presence, steadiness, and ethical care. I'm grateful to be joined by Haley Jones. Haley is a longtime creative practitioner, educator, and community space holder whose work centers on transformation, self-expression, and the quiet power of human connection. With more than 15 years as a licensed cosmetologist and instructor, she blends skill and intuitive care, creating environments where people feel seen and supported. Her work pays close attention to the emotional and symbolic layers of personal expression, how identity, lineage, and lived experiences shape the way people move through the world. Now offering her gifts through collaborative community work, Haley focuses on deep listening, empathy, and honest connection. She believes in the innate power and wholesomeness of each person and brings that belief into every space she holds. Haley, thank you for being here.
Thank you
Welcome to
for
the show.
thank you for having me.
So today we're going to talk about the balance between serving others and tending to ourselves. That's a balance that can feel both essential and complicated. So let's begin with our first talking points. Welcome to the show, Haley. I'm so glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So I have a few questions for you today. So I'm just gonna jump right in.
Let's go for it.
All right, so why does self-healing matter? So, as you know, as practitioners, sometimes our journey is from being a practitioner started from just sharing what we have experienced. So, why does self healing matter, and how does your personal work underpins integrity and effectiveness in your professional role?
So, I have learned that personal healing is the foundation of professional integrity. When I'm taking care of myself, not in a performative way, but in an honest and consistent way, I can feel like a true difference in how I show up and serve others. Um, I've got some notes here.
No, you're good.
So it keeps me aware of my own edges. Whenever I realize that something I'm feeling is mine and not the other person that I'm holding space for or conversating with, it anchors me into this place where I can hold that space instead of trying to fill it. And a lot of times I find that's, unintentional. We're only human. It is, we have something at the forefront of our mind, something's going on. And we really just have to set that aside and truly be in the moment and hold that space for this person. If I don't do my own work, I have found that it shows up. So my boundaries will feel fuzzy, or I'll start to operate out of depletion. I have something that I learned a long time ago, and it's that you cannot pour from an empty cup. It was a hard learned lesson for me, but I have now learned on the flip side, when I'm tending to myself and taking care of my needs, I show up clearer, calmer, and more attuned. So it isn't separate from service for me. It's what makes the service ethical and sustainable.
Yeah, I honestly, I definitely agree with that. Not being, you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something I had to learn myself. I remember watching a video and them just pouring water and the cup was empty. And they were like, this is, if you continue to pour, right, you're not going to have anything
Mm-hmm.
left. So definitely agree that understanding that taking care of you is actually taking care of your clients.
Mm-hmm. 100%. It's necessity.
Exactly. And if you're not, can you really show up for them, right? Are you able to show up for your clients like you need to if you're depleted, right?
Yeah.
Tired.
Nope.
So there's our practitioner paradox that supporting others while navigating our own ongoing growth. So what do you think about that paradox of like trying to support others and also navigating our own growth? And how do you even do that?
Yeah. So the paradox for all practitioners is that everybody assumes we have it figured out. You're out there, you're helping people, you're holding space, you're out there working in the real world, and they think that we have it all together. But we're human and we're growing right alongside all of the people that we're supporting. I think it's called imposter syndrome. And
Yeah.
I've certainly been, a person who walked through the world with that, especially in the very beginning of my journey. So a few years later, I have come to see that it's not about being healed and it's not about being perfect as much as my human brain wants to strive for perfectionism. It's just not feasible. It's not real, and that's not helping anybody. So I try to approach it with honesty, first and foremost with myself. Really accepting that as truth and working through that. And then, understanding and trusting and believing that I can simultaneously work on myself while guiding others. I can help them while I'm still amongst my own journey.
Yeah. And not allowing it to interfere with
Mm-hmm.
your clients, and which is definitely very important. No. I mean, I think that a lot of practitioners who have less experience, especially you've been in the game for a while,
Mm-hmm.
they might feel that like, oh, how am I going to help this person if I'm still over here trying to heal this or,
Mm-hmm.
grow in this area. And that's when that imposter syndrome show up, like you said, like that shows up when we're feeling like we're basically being a fraud and we're trying to say that we can help others, but not really sharing that we are actually struggling with this specific thing.
Yeah. And I think it helps to keep a circle of other people that also, you know, friends, trusted therapists, your partners, whoever you have around you, to keep yourself in check and keep yourself grounded and balanced and aligned.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Having support is definitely important because they might be the one keeping you going.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
let's get into boundaries now. So, for boundaries and transparency, what is something that is appropriate to share with your client or anyone in the community when you're on your own process? I know that as practitioners, we have our own story, but how do you create boundaries when you're speaking of your own story and being transparent when you're sharing your own struggles or your own story with your clients?
Mm-hmm. So I've learned there's a big difference between being transparent and oversharing. People appreciate, authenticity, but they also need not, it's an expectation, but they truly need us to be the grounded person in the room or in the conversation. Before I am considering sharing something with someone, I've learned to ask myself, is this going to serve them or is it meant to soothe me?
Mm,
Is this going to help them in this journey, in this, this place that they're in this moment? Or am I just going to feel better if I say, hey, I've done this or I've been here? That question alone has saved me a lot of boundary crossing. Um, you know, Appropriate transparency can build trust. Like I said, people want authenticity, but there's a line there, and we have to be responsible enough and recognize that before we cross that line.
mm.
Mm.
Do you think that being too transparent could like run like clients off or maybe push people from even wanting to, invest in your service?
I think that it blurs that line. As a professional, when we do that, we kind of change that dynamic. It shifts a little bit. We kind of turn that person into a confidant or a friend. And it's not that our clients can't be our friends, because they can to a degree, but in the past I have blurred that line. And it's not that they don't want to work with me any longer, it's that they expect it to be different. They may not look at me as, a client and practitioner anymore. They look at me as, hey, that's my friend. Like, we're going to sit down and have a talk and talk about what all's going on, when really it should be a space, an open space for healing and growth.
Yeah, because you're kind of like doing your client a disservice of what they need when you change the dynamic of the relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
So in that situation, like how can someone not find themselves in that situation? Like what are some tips to eliminate creating that type of relationship between the client thinking that, oh, this is just my friend?
I think for me personally, like I mentioned, is, think before you speak. One of those age old golden rules. When we are holding space, I think we have to be intentional. We have to tune into that person, tune into the energy that they are exuding and that they need. And so, like I said, just asking myself, is what I'm about to say going to serve them, or is it just going to make me feel better to get this off my chest? Um, being responsible with that emotional reality is just making sure that I'm not making somebody else responsible for carrying that. That
Mhm.
that's my burden or my situation, or the path of my journey. It's not appropriate and it's not fair to kind
Yeah.
of put that on them.
Yeah. And it's not doing them a it's doing them a disservice of like
Mm-hmm.
dumping, and it's not even going to benefit them in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So, as practitioners, we sometimes struggle with the balance of self work or also self care, right? How
Mm-hmm.
is how do you navigate the ongoing like healing support? Um, sorry, how do you navigate your own personal needs versus holding attention for others? So for example, if you are feeling depleted, or maybe you're like, okay, this is a very heavy month for me, maybe I'm going to take a break. So how do you determine there's signs of misalignment and recognizing your own personal healing instead of trying to place attention on help holding space for others?
That better? Okay. Okay. So I can usually tell right away that I'm, misaligned before I can tell why. It's not always blaringly obvious what's going on. I can just feel, in my body, I'm tense, I'm irritable, or I'm distracted. I may feel foggy, or like I'm pushing, I'm forcing instead of letting things just flow from me. So, it shows up in different ways, feeling resentful about giving or avoiding certain conversations, um, being overly invested in someone's outcome, or losing that natural empathy that I normally have. It took some time and some effort and a lot of journaling and self-reflecting, kind of seeing those patterns of, okay, this was going on, this was how things were going, personally, professionally, and kind of, learning that groove and that ebb and flow. So
Yeah.
it's also taken me time to look at that as signals and not failures. Um, it's a reminder that something inside of me needs attention. And whenever I honor that signal early, I can course correct before burnout or emotional spillover happens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as just a human, I have a history of burnout. I want to help, I want to do, I want to take on so much, and then I crash and burn. Uh, I'm thankful to say that that's not, my MO now. I've learned a lot about myself, and I'm able to recognize that as it first starts to happen before the big the big burnout goes.
I mean, I love that you have been able to kind of see where you are feeling like you're getting to that point where, all right, I need to take a break. This is starting to feel like burnout, and recognizing those, I wouldn't even say patterns, recognizing those triggers that is happening so that you can be able to course correct, like you said earlier. Like, I mean, I think that's very important as a practitioner because one, we're holding space for others and being able to also recognize when we need to take a step back and actually nourish ourselves, pour into ourselves so that we can actually show up like we need to, course correct, right? And kind of see what's really happening, what maybe triggered me feeling like this, right? So definitely, I think that's very important. Um, because that's how you're able to show up to your clients in the best way possible.
Mhm. Yep.
So how do you navigate your own healing as far as on a day-to-day basis um, and keeping yourself in a way that you have that energetic stability in your practice?
So I used to see, self-worth and self-care as something that I did during a crisis. Something would explode figuratively, and then I would have to pick up the pieces and collect myself. And now I see it more as regular maintenance. um this example I thought of earlier, and it's about, I had to go get things at the store. I got toothpaste, and I was like, okay, like that makes sense. It kind of clicked in my head on this talking point, like, you don't wait for a dental emergency to start taking care of your teeth. You don't wait for an emotional emergency to start taking care of your spirit. Or if you do, you're going to pay for it in another way, same as the teeth. You may go to the dentist and spend $1,000 rather than a $50 cleaning thing. So I definitely have to do daily check-ins, whether that is at the end of the day, after the kiddo is in bed, after the cats are fed and the lights are down, just sitting down for 5 minutes and either physically writing, or I have 500 notes in my phone. I have one literally called brain dump. And so it just helps me to get those things out at the end of the day or in the middle of the day or while I'm waiting on somebody. Um, Protecting those pockets of quiet time. So, I noticed you were drinking tea, so I'm a coffee girl. And if I can just get get 5 minutes to sip of my coffee, kind of enjoy and appreciate those little things. Um, Going back to the circle I mentioned earlier, keeping mentors or trusted peers around. I do have a good small circle of people, some in this realm and some not. I do have a medical therapist, and sometimes we are in the throes of trauma from my childhood or whatever. And sometimes we're just catching up, and then something pops off and I'm like, oh yeah, like, I'm able to make those connections just having an unbiased person to listen. So um another thing is honoring the need for that without feeling guilty. It that I do honestly, I still struggle with a little bit, especially after having a child. I would feel like anytime I'm home, I need to be with him, right there for every little thing. And I want to, of course, that's only natural. But it's not fair if I can't show up in the best way that I can to him, to clients, or to other people that I value the relationships with.
Mhm. Wow. Definitely as a mom, I can see why it can be challenging not to like want to like drop everything and we feeling depleted, but no, they still want to play a game. And and I think that's just this natural innate thing within us have this nurturing spirit. I mean, even it's just human beings to want to support, to want to give, but also understanding that balance of give and rest so that we're not constantly being depleted. And then maintenance, like you said, being able to have 5 minutes of drinking your coffee and and if that, I mean, even just getting that is going to be beneficial for your day and being able to show up for the people in your life and your clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to remind myself, while at face value, I'm doing these things for me, I'm also doing them for my son, for my clients, for my loved ones, because if I am able to show up as my best self, then that's benefiting them as well.
Exactly. Exactly. Because like if we're not, we're gonna be cranky. We might even offend a client and they're like, oh, I don't want to work with her no more, or I don't want to work with them no more, right? So I mean it's just it comes back to them and us. Like it benefits us, but it also benefits everyone that's interacting with us. So no, definitely is very important.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a practitioner and I'm like, I don't have time to do something for myself, what would you tell them and how to navigate that and how beneficial it is for them to show up?
You know, I it goes back to kind of that thing that we mentioned in the beginning,
Yeah,
is do I express to them, do I share with them where I've been? And I would think in that instance, I would. I would relate and say, hey, I've been there. My mindset has been there, but it led to X, Y, and Z. And, maybe just do a little challenge of, do it for a week. Take 15 minutes a day. Take it at once, take it 3 times in 5-minute intervals, but just see. Um, and I think, nobody's gonna, it's not gonna be to anybody's detriment if they do that. You're really just investing in yourself, your mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So I would, you know, relate there and then encourage.
Mm. I know one of the things you mentioned previously in our discussion is burnout. And so as practitioners, we tend to have a lot of compassion for people. We want to help everybody if we can. But understanding how to use self-awareness so that you can prevent burnout. So what are some ways that you have been able to use self-awareness to prevent burnout and emotional depletion?
I have now learned that, burnout doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from doing too much without replenishing, without filling my own cup. I used to experience it when I'm given that support from a place of emptiness. You know,
Mm,
like I said, if my cup is empty, I can't pour from it. I can try, but it's not going to do any good. Like you said, the video you seen, I'm pouring the water, but there's nothing coming out. So, I notice my empathy gets thin and I start counting those minutes down to when I'm able to flip it off. So when I see those signs now, I ask myself, what do I need? What does Haley need? What does my soul need before I answer or ask, what does somebody else need? Making that shift, making that mind change has been huge for me. Again, I have a lot of guilt. I have had a lot of guilt for a lot of things my whole life, but that's another thing I've had to adjust not to see as failure. Um, it fatigue, burnout, it all happens. But again, back to that course correction. So it really is just a sign that we're human and that we need taken care of too. And the earlier we catch it, the easier and more graceful that we're able to reset.
Hmm. And something you mentioned was having that guilt. It's something that we get the guilt of wanting to help, for feeling burnt out, because and then we're feeling guilty for having those feelings.
Mhm.
And honestly, I think that's just one of the challenges as a practitioner. People who care, you're going to deal with, and understanding how to navigate that, and thinking about what is most important, taking care of my well-being so that I can show up for others.
Mhm.
And when I don't take care of myself, I can't show up for others.
Mm-hmm. At least not in any type of meaningful way. I can appear as if I'm showing up. I can appear as if I'm filling a glass, but there's no substance there because you're empty.
Mhm. And people are going to pick up on that energy that
Mhm.
you're putting out. And they might not be able to tell what's wrong, but they're just going to know something is not right with the interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's not going to sit well.
Exactly. And they're going to leave you like, I don't know. I had a bad feeling about this person, or I was picking up something, but I don't know what I was picking up, but it wasn't a good feeling.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I think that leads us into ethical responsibility and how our unhealed aspects can influence our client relationships. And so I guess we want to talk about that, having that responsibility and also giving ourselves grace. So how can you navigate those parts of you that feel unhealed,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're not influencing your client relationships in like a negative way, or in a way that's not going to be beneficial for your client?
Yeah. One of the biggest responsibilities I think that we have as practitioners is being ethically responsible. A big portion of that is knowing our own triggers, knowing the parts of us that are unhealed or not full. Back to that again. And so, if I'm not aware of all of those things, I risk projecting that onto someone else. Um, it really should look like recognizing when I'm activated and choosing not to make the moment about me. Um, when something in a conversation or a session triggers me, I need to be able to put that aside. I've always, since I was a teenager, in conversation, if there's something that's it sparks, I sit there like this. And
Mm,
I've had people pick up on it before and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I'm holding that thought. And it may not be something that I'm going to express right then, or I obviously can't turn to the side and put that in my brain dump note, but
yeah.
it's something it's something that I can go back to when I'm outside of that session, and taking accountability about that, without feeling shameful. You know, I have in the past overshared. I have brought the attention, just slightly towards myself. And I have to say, look, I'm sorry. That was something that reminded me of something else. And I would like to focus this back on, the point here today, or the topic at hand.
Mhm.
The big thing is just being aware. And when something in me gets stirred up or gets, a little agitated, I try not to shame myself. I just think, hey, this needs my attention later. And that's the difference, I think, between reacting and responding.
Wow. I love how you said holding that thought. Like, that's like a really great, I mean, I exercise. If you're having a conversation with a client, and something comes up that you feel like is not ethical to your client, being able to hold that thought, and then they're like, what's going on? You can explain that to them. Like, this is something came up that wasn't related to this, and I want to refocus on what's at hand in this session, right? And being able to have that self awareness that something is actually coming up, for me that's unrelated to this discussion or this session, and being able to take that and put it to the side and focus on your client.
Yeah, it's something, even in my at night after the kiddo's in bed and I'm, talking with my fiance, if he's saying, this happened and this today and I thought about this, and I'm like, I'm standing there just with my hand in my hand, and he knows now, of course, but he used to just kind of look at me and I'm like, oh, that reminded me of something, and I'm trying not to interrupt. But yeah, it's just a little quirky thing, and it helps me. So
Yeah. No, I'm gonna take that away from our discussion because I think like I get so excited about the conversation, and
Mhm.
then something comes up that's related to it, but not really related to it, and I want to share it. So I'm like, I'm just gonna hold that thought.
Mhm. Yep.
All right, so so as we close with this interview, so let's talk about some long-term things that people can do when it comes to building sustainable practices for reflection, even self-awareness, mentorship, and restoration. So, what are some ways that a practitioner can create that rhythm and renewal?
Yeah, I have found my renewal comes from ritual, not just reset. Not just rest. I'm sorry. My open scratch. Rest, of course, it fills you. It gives you time to sit and reflect, but the ritual really reconnects me. Some of these are a little repetitive, but it's true, and it is something that helps me time before my son wakes up in the morning, with or without coffee. But I love sleep. I always have. But if I can get up 30 minutes before he does, and I just have that quiet time in the morning, it allows me to reflect on the day before, the night, and kind of mentally prepare myself for the day. If I'm focusing that day on him, I'm home with him that day, that's great. I'm thinking, what are we gonna have for lunch? What are we gonna do? What activity? And if I'm preparing to be with clients, it's, what did we last speak about? What is going on with their life right now? And just kind of gearing up. And sometimes it's simply just being with myself. And I have now accepted and appreciated that that's okay too.
Yeah.
Resetting my space. I mentioned I mentioned before we started recording that I'm in a different space than normal here in my home. And you, space for me is a lot. I love to have my plants. I love to have my tapestry and my books and my, whatever. And so it really does help my mindset to just have my space, feel cozy, comfy, cozy. Those are two words that are rooted in my soul. I want to be comfy and I want to feel cozy. So, not that this isn't comfortable, it's just not my normal setup, so to speak. So, environment for that as well. And journaling. I don't always traditionally journal. I'm not writing paragraphs or a diary, but I keep a planner. And a lot of times it's a mirror image of my digital calendars, personal and professional, but I'm able to plan ahead and then also go back and reflect. And that is something for me that is just connecting that physical act of writing. There's something about that for me. And that may not be something for everybody, but it is. It really helps with my flow. Uh,
Yeah.
Reading, another thing, whether it's self-help or, a good fiction or nonfiction. Um, that's just a little hobby that sometimes is, for the betterment of others and myself, and sometimes it's just for fun. Um, Creative work, I do crochet. That is something I taught myself to do using YouTube. Um, and I have picked up if it's like a present for someone. I have made quite a few baby blankets now. And, I'm able, if I'm able, to sit and just be quiet and maybe have some music going or whatever, and just think about, being intentional with every little stitch that I do. Um, that's a ritualistic thing that, I'm able to pour energy into that as well. And I have found that when I build that ritual, those rhythms into my life, my nervous system stays more stable. Um, I stay clearer. My intuition is there. It's bright and not fuzzy, and there's no haziness, and I'm able to hold space for others without losing myself in that process. So renewal is not occasional, it's woven in. It's woven into
Mm.
my daily happenings.
Wow. Kind of like the crochet.
Literally.
Your rituals are woven in. No, I mean that's very important. Rituals for sure. Like that's I actually did a trial where I did rituals and then I did nothing at all. Like I just ignored my routines and just started my day hitting the ground running. And it was so, like you say, your nervous system, I felt a significant difference in my nervous system in a negative way by
Mhm.
not having those rituals. And it doesn't have to look like everyone else's, but being able to restore ourselves. And even just our environments, like you said, comfy and cozy, like that's the type of environment you like to be in, and just even our environment can be very nourishing to our nervous system. So just having those rituals that you do actually helps restore yourself, and you're able to actually show up for yourself, but also for everyone around you, your clients and your family.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes a difference. Like you said, you tried. You were like comparing, contrasting how you felt, how your life was flowing when you were doing it versus when you weren't. And so it is a little bit of a trial and error to figure out what works and what you enjoy. Um, I did a little experiment where I thought about selling crochet pieces, and I had some discussions, and at least for this moment, this season in life, that's not something I want to pursue. I really do find that I'm making something for somebody that I care about. Um, and so I'm doing something for somebody else. I'm making something for somebody else, but I'm getting just as much out of it as,
Yeah,
being able to sit in that moment and in that space, even when that person's not physically there with me. I'm able
yeah.
to connect with them through that. So,
Wow. No, I mean, I'm just thinking about situations that I have experienced with like cooking, and I thought I used to want to sell it, and I even done it, and it was so draining.
mhm.
And now I just like making stuff and giving it to my friends if they see it on my Facebook. They're like, "Can I have some of that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll make you some next time." And it's like I get joy out of that because I know that my passion and the feeling is from actually just giving and knowing that these people I love and care about, how they feel when they had the cinnamon roll or the brownie or whatever, right? So that's the same thing. Like it's that is where you're feeding your spirit, where you're able to connect with them and see how they're gonna feel when they get the blanket, when they get the special gift that you made for them. And that right there is nourishing for your soul. And you don't really have to put a price on selling that because you enjoy doing it for the people you care about.
Yep. And it may not always be that way, but at least for now, that's something I want to keep kind of sacred. It's
Mm,
like a love language, like you with making something for your friends. Like it's a love language. Like, hey, I put my time and effort into this and I want you to have it.
Oh, wow. So it's kind of have you showing love to the people you care about.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Haley, this has been good. Thank you for sharing. You said what?
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So thank you so much for sharing your reflections, your lived experience with us today, your openness about navigating your own healing while holding space for others brings so much clarity to a topic that is often talked about quietly, but lived by every practitioner. Today, we explore the importance of self work as a foundation for ethical service, the reality of being in process while guiding others, and the role boundaries and discernment play in staying aligned. We also looked at the signs that personal healings need attention. So, how to prevent compassion fatigue and the practices that support sustainability and resilience over time. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this conversation today. We hope it supports you in staying grounded, present, and steady in your work. Next month, we'll be joined by Victoria Watkins for a discussion on abundance and anti-capitalism in spiritual practice. It's a thoughtful look at how practitioners can engage with money and resources without losing alignment or integrity. We appreciate you for being part of this series. Take good care, and we'll see you in the next episode.